Hi. Okay, so you wanted darker, breaking through the shadows in search of the ANIMA MUNDI world soul, part 3. The object of the journey, which started down into the labyrinth, is to follow the thread, as I said in part 1 and 2, to follow the thread of the transits and the placements and the lunations and the events. And this is about following world events to find the world shadow, because as we're discovering, as we enter the shift more and more that we're going through, the accelerating shift, as we leave 3D reality or dimensions behind and move into 5D, things are beginning to feel different. They're going into some confusion. And as Jungian psychology professed, the way to get in touch with the present and to get a feel for the future is to go into the past. So that's why to confront the shadow would seem to be, as Jungian psychology and evolutionary astrology professors, seem to be the best way to understand where we've been, what our shadow has caused us to confront, and a full confrontation of that is necessary before we can actually move into the future. Hence the stuck feeling that we may have, because we don't fully understand where we've been at the moment. So in an attempt to clarify that, astrology is a wonderful vehicle, as it professes that we go down into the psyche, down into the labyrinth, face the shadow, face the darkness, in order to come through into the light, to find our path, our lighted path into the present, through the present into the future. So anyway, so part 1 and 2 were centered on the world wars, as they were obviously the monumental, in world history, the monumental events. We tend to want to brush them under the carpet, because it's as though it's something that we think isn't long in the past, although it isn't in our lifetimes. My parents lived through it, and many of us had people who lived through it. It's very, very recent, and it's still heavily in our psyches, and it still heavily influences the world today. So we had part 2 particularly went on an exploration of the world wars. I will be going over that again because we haven't left it behind. We just need to go deeper now, and to continue the story, we got to the end of World War II, and the end of the World War was a great relief, although that wasn't the end of it. There was much suffering that went on after that isn't really spoken about. All the immigrants that were hundreds of thousands of people displaced, destruction all over Europe and in the Pacific, amazing loss. And so it took years to recover from that, and we never really have. So the feeling was the Wicked Witch at least was dead, and we'd done a great thing, and the World War was a great success, World War II, and that was the end of it. But it really wasn't, and the Wicked Witch wasn't dead either, as we know. The Wicked Witch is never dead, and that the Wicked Witch is our shadow, basically. So anyway, going further back, before going further into after World War II, going back now to before we confront the next stage, and what it would seem is the main markers of World War I and II, as we discovered, by the degrees that were hit constantly, 9 degrees, particularly Leo and Aquarius, up to 13 degrees Leo and Aquarius. These degrees hit constantly between mostly fixed signs and some cardinal signs, but the same degrees coming up again and again, which is part of the thread. It shows us the story if we follow them, and gives us an insight that we wouldn't have had. So anyway, so going back further into the past, it seemed like, where did all this begin? What is very noticeable about the world wars is the scientific, when you really go into the wars, is the scientific development that was caused through them and happened throughout them. And so science was in line with the war. There's really no separating them. Terrible weapons devised, which just got worse after World War I. That was a complete shock that weapons could do the damage they could, chemical weapons and artillery and bombs. And then, of course, it just accelerated in World War II. But these incredible scientific developments are what has shown us so many things that would seem miracles today, like the internet that we have now, like, you know, all these incredible developments. So the main point of taking off would seem to be when Uranus was discovered with scientific development. So going back to that, and we could put up the balloon, Linda, the balloon slide. Hello. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so this was 1783, and Uranus was actually discovered in 1781. But obviously this was only a couple of years after, and it would really seem to encompass the feeling of the Uranian. This was actually the first flight. So the first manned flight. Mankind had never been in the air before, and how Uranian is that? It's Uranus taking off. It's really Uranus's entry into the world. And as Uranus is pretty sarcastic most of the time, it has sort of a sick, sardonic sense of humor. Actually, Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI were present, and it had taken place just outside Paris. And so what I thought at first were suns and moons, you know, the faces, actually were the faces of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI on the balloon. Which, when you think about what happened after, the French Revolution, of course, happened a few years later, and is often associated with Uranus, the discovery of Uranus, as is the American Revolution, which happened in 1776, obviously. Sandwiched between that was the Uranian discovery and discovery of Uranus and this balloon flight. So it would really, when you look at it, it would be the suspended heads with no bodies of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, which is typically Uranian. But, you know, that's progress. Not always very nice. But anyhow, so funnily enough too, when I looked at all that, I realized I actually had the painting behind me, a print of it, that I'd had for years. And I just bought, because that's a pretty color, that's a pretty balloon. I want a balloon behind me because it's good feng shui. And it turned out to be this balloon that I recognized when I turned around. Weird, I've had it behind my desk. But anyway, so this is the entry of Uranus, and then it also heralded huge scientific developments as well as the revolutions. Oh, by the way, at that same year, 1783, was also the Treaty of Paris, which was in September 3rd, 1783. And that was when the American independence was actually realized. It was when actually the treaty was actually signed, that it was recognized by England. Before then, it hadn't been. By the United Kingdom, it hadn't been. Wasn't the United Kingdom then, was it? I don't know what it was. England, I should know, I'm English. But anyway, but they gathered together in Paris and actually signed that in 1873. And there is a chart for that. It's September 3rd. Anyway, so going on from that, scientific developments just flew as breaking the bounds of Earth, you would describe it, uranium. And so the next important date after that, 1879, which is about the year I think the revolution broke out, sorry, 1789, was when uranium was actually discovered. And that couldn't have been more appropriate either. And uranium, of course, is that is what is used in atomic science, bombs, power, everything. So uranium is the major quality, the major ingredient. Also, in the scientific world, that was the year that hold on, I've got this thing for it. The next slide, thanks. The next slide. Sorry, I forgot what it's called. The table of periodic, sorry, periodic something. I can't remember, but it's the very famous table of the different substances, chemicals, and all the substances. They weren't all discovered then, but this is when the periodic table was first put together by a German scientist. And it was actually in that same year, 1789, that uranium was discovered. So this table was based on the old alchemy, which was obviously where, and we could put that up next, the next slide, just to whiz through a bit. Don't just spend too long. By the way, you can see, oh, it's gone. You can see uranium there, a U, under U, if you go back to it sometime. So this is the chart, I think. This is the chart for the discovery of uranium, which is quite amazing. So many times in scientific developments, particularly with physics, with the discoveries of quantum science, you can see Uranus conjunct Jupiter. So, and in here, obviously, we have Jupiter conjunct Uranus in first degrees of Leo, 5 degrees Leo. And again, you have this emphasis on Leo and Aquarius. So it's also part of the entry. I mean, I would say it's the real entry with the entrance of Uranus onto the scene of the start of the Aquarian age. Because as we know, it takes so long with the precession of the equinoxes to actually move into an age that you can't pinpoint exactly when it happens. But it's an obvious marker. And I think we already realize that it's the ruler of Aquarius. So with all this scientific development, as well as the revolutions, it's like a rocket propelled boost into the age of Aquarius. And though it seems a long time ago to us, it's really not in world history. So we've accelerated now a lot, and we are doing, but and the world wars accelerated us, but that was all the start of it. So a really exciting time, and but also obviously a deeply unsettling time, because that's what Uranus is about. That's what the outer planets are about. They're unsettling, they're extreme, and why is that? You know, you could say that's part of our, does it have to be that way? Is it that our shadow colludes with that? Our psyches collude with it? If we were more conscious, would that be the case? And I think that's part of what we're waking up to, that our consciousness dictates how unsettling the world has to be in order to progress. Anyway, let's move on. So, you know, that's a really great chart if you go back to that. Okay, so this is Planck's quantum theory. And obviously that was when Jupiter was conjunct the Sun. You've got Uranus as well, so there's a Y conjunction there to Uranus again with Jupiter. Yeah, that's another amazing chart. That was on the 14th of December, 1900. So 1900 is said to be in Vedic astrology, in the, supposedly, I might have got this wrong, so I don't want to offend anyone, is a Vedic astrologer, but it's supposed to be a very important year when the dark is going into the light. So anyway, so 1900 was the year that Planck's theory came about of quantum mechanics. So that was really the start of it. But going back just before that, it's as though there was a harbinger of that, a portent in Alice in Wonderland, which is Through the Looking Glass. And that's the next slide. I think it's the next slide. Should be. The next slide. I must learn to do this myself. I'm sorry. I should learn to do it. I must. The next slide. Yeah. Okay. I think we've missed Alice in Wonderland, but I don't know if you've got that, but we can always go back to it if not.
It wasn't included, I don't think.
Oh, wasn't it? Oh, it's just a little one. I think I put just one of Alice, but then let's just say it. I mean, it's fine. Just quickly, Alice in Wonderland was published in 1871, and that it was really in reply to Darwin's theory, which came out in 1865. That was published, and Darwinism obviously made people feel that you know, the world was getting more and more, less of a spiritual quality, less faith, was becoming God was obviously getting lost in that. So being a man of God, a man of religion, Lewis Carroll decided to write Alice in Wonderland. It doesn't seem very religious, and it seemed to go into the unconscious, more into the unconscious and the field of dreams. But when you actually look at it, it really describes quantum mechanics. There's a small quote here about inverse reflections, the motifs of Alice in Wonderland. And it says here, and this is from Spark Notes, which is quite a good synopsis of it. Many of the basic assumptions that Alice makes about her environment are reversed in Looking Glass World. This is Alice Through the Looking Glass, was the one published. Outcomes precede events. Cakes are passed out before being cut. Destinations are reached by walking in the opposite direction. And characters remember the future and think best while standing on their heads. These strange phenomena challenge the way Alice thinks, and in some cases expose the arbitrary nature of her understanding of her own world. Many of Alice's experiences exist as meaningless parodies of aspects of her own familiar world back home. Alice becomes aware of a new inverted perspective on life as she travels forward and backward through the Looking Glass world. So oddly, that was published 29 years before Planck's theory came out, and seems, if you follow Saturn's cycle, as we did before, it seems to mark every major development with quantum mechanics and atomic particle development in science. It's incredible. But anyway, so moving on, 14 years after Planck's quantum theory, and when he published the theory, Saturn was at 6 degrees Capricorn. So I actually don't have to peer at the screen. I've got this written down, which is easier, being short-sighted. Okay, so the start of World War I, the sun entered, as we saw before, it entered 9-10 degrees Leo, opposite Uranus. Aquarius, as the major marker for that, was at 9-10 degrees Aquarius. So it was opposite. That was obviously on the 3rd of August, 1914. There was a full moon directly after that, 6th of August, which was a full moon at 12-13 degrees Aquarius. Saturn went into, famously went into the 1st degrees of Cancer, conjunct Pluto, a major marker of war, with Jupiter at 14 degrees Aquarius, 13-14 Aquarius on the 4th of September. So as Saturn moved into Cancer, so the Aquarian Leo fields started up at the same time. And it really was as well as all the destruction, it was a major accelerator, as I said before, of science. And really the start, when everything just lifted off. Why? Because mankind, being ruled by mankind's shadow, wanted to destroy each other. But in wanting to destroy each other, they made huge scientific developments, not all of them good, but the progress was made one way or another. And you wonder, with evolution, that seems to be the main thrust of evolution, that the means justify the ends. Evolution takes place. We perhaps should be conscious of that by now, and I think we are becoming conscious of it, that if we don't stop projecting our shadow will overtake us, will rule us, will bring out the worst in mankind. Anyway, so World War I was a great example of that. Moving on, for an example, Einstein's theory was published in 1915 during World War I. Uranus again at 12-13 degrees Aquarius, conjunct the North Node at 10 degrees Aquarius. Saturn at 16 degrees Cancer, and that degree comes up again when the bomb was tested. Uranus was at 2 degrees Capricorn, opposite Neptune, in 1905 when it was first discovered. So all of these developments, Einstein's theory of relativity, were in line with the war. He actually tried to get it confirmed during the war, because he followed the eclipses, but found it very difficult with the war going on. He needed an eclipse to confirm his theory, which is fascinating. Anyway, during that time, of course, which is often sort of forgotten, Soviet Russia was formed. The date of the 8th of November 1917, the Russian Revolution, which is the third revolution. I mean, we forget about that. There was the American, there's French, and then of course there's the Russian Revolution, was the other great revolution, and that took place in culminated in 1917. But at that point, yeah, I haven't put it there, but actually I was going to put the chart up, but I didn't. No, I didn't have time. But the chart for that does show that there was an eclipse. That's right. I think at 13. No. Sorry, there was an eclipse, but also Uranus was at, I think it was 13 Aquarius. So again, Russia was very much, involved later on with the atomic bomb and the scientific discoveries as well. Anyway, so moving on, the end of World War I, Neptune was at 9-10 Leo. The Versailles Treaty, which was a major reason why World War II happened, was signed with Pluto at 6 degrees degrees Cancer, squaring Chiron at 6 degrees Aries. Einstein's theory of relativity was actually confirmed on November 6, 1919, with the lunar eclipse at 14 degrees Taurus, again, fixed signs squaring that degree again, squaring Aquarius, squaring Leo. At T square to Jupiter, at 70 degrees conjunct Neptune, at 11 degrees Leo. So repeat and repeat and repeat. So the thread is showing, it's showing a story, it's showing what to follow, it's showing that these are the important parts of the story to follow, the messages and the connections. So anyway, the Great Depression, as I said before in the last part, started the 29th of October 29, again 13 degrees Taurus, solar eclipse at 9 degrees Scorpio, again those degrees are fixed. Saturn about to square Uranus at 7-8 degrees Aries, and again the Capricorn, the early Capricorn cardinal degrees enter in December 29 as World War II approaches, the lead up to World War II. Pluto obviously discovered 18th February 1930, with the sun at 19 degrees Aquarius, Pluto at 17 degrees Cancer. That degree of Cancer repeated again because later on that degree came up. Saturn was there when the bomb was tested and dropped. So I'm sorry, there's all this information and no charts, but it's so much to get in that I just want to skip through it. You know, it takes so long. But I just wanted to show the connections there. The Nazis came in 1933 into power. 14 years, again, a Saturn cycle after the first, after the US action in the first action by the USA in the First World War, took place at Saturn 9 degrees Leo. So, you know, we've done that about Hitler becoming chancellor on an eclipse again. In fact, at the start of World War II, Hitler's sun was being squared by, obviously, by Pluto, which is at 0 degrees Leo, but also the South Node was conjunct, which makes you wonder if there was some sort of past life connection for him. This was him coming back to repeat something that he started maybe in a life before, and you know didn't get to finish it that time. Who knows? I mean, according to evolutionary astrology, that would be possible. It did seem very fated. His whole chart and his life seemed very fated with the whole thing, and you know, you do wonder how much fate is included, how much evolution. Obviously, this is what we discuss as evolutionary astrologers. Evolution and fate and destiny seem to go together, and but obviously free will and choice, which comes out of consciousness, we would hope, and what we believe is that makes the difference. That's the turning point. Anyway, so obviously he didn't make very good choices, and he wasn't very conscious. No. Anyway, okay. So okay. Again, just to repeat, he created the Office of Jewish Immigration on the 5th of August, which was a day of a lunar eclipse at 13 degrees Aquarius. Again, it's just bizarre how often that comes up. Conjunct Saturn at 13 degrees Aquarius. And it was 14 years before the Saturn-Pluto conjunction at 13 degrees Leo of the 11th of August, 1947, which would have been Hitler's Saturn return, oddly enough. But if he'd gone to an astrologer, a good one, and, you know, actually taken Pluto into account, which they probably didn't back then, as it just been discovered, he might have had second thoughts, or probably not, because he was a very stubborn person. But anyway, so Yeah, it seemed very fated, and just as well, because the bomb in the hands of Hitler wouldn't have been a great thing, as I said before. Actually, he was weirdly so obsessed with the V2 rocket, another invention during World War II, and dropping it on London, that he paid no attention to the development of a bomb at all. He wasn't interested. He didn't want total annihilation. He just wanted to destroy, societies and win. He didn't want to annihilate everything, and just he had no imagination. He couldn't see the point in it. But anyway, he focused on the rocket, and that was his downfall again, thank God. Anyway, so Einstein left Germany actually on October 3rd, 1933. And the North Node was conjunct Aquarius then. Lisa Meitner, just skipping through, she split the atom. She was on the way almost to splitting the atom. Obviously, she was a Jewish scientist in Berlin. So many of them. And she was on the verge of splitting the atom when she had to flee Nazi Germany in 1938. And again, it picks up her fleeing. It's picked up that 17 degrees of cardinal, which is picked up by the dropping of the bomb, the development of it. And even in Einstein's chart, that degree is picked up of cardinal. Anyway, so she fled it, but it was a remarkable story. She had to collaborate with her fellow scientists back in Berlin. As she had to go, he actually did the splitting of it, but she collaborated with him on it and gave him instructions. So it was just everything, just on the verge, and just saved just at the last minute. Quite remarkable, the whole story. And so things seem very fated, seem very destined. There were very good turns of fate that just seemed to save things at the last minute, as I said, and promote science at the end of the day. So, right, we've done Hitler. So anyway, skip that. Okay, the Manhattan Project, which was obviously the project that was to develop the bomb, the atom bomb, began on the 13th of August, that date again, 1942, which was actually the same day that Stalingrad was won. And it was disbanded on the 15th of August, 1947, when that Saturn Pluto conjunction took place on the 11th of August. Strange, the whole thing. And also the US Army landed in France and in Brittany, actually, on the 4th of August, under another eclipse, 12 degrees Aquarius, that same day that Anne Frank was taken to prison, as we said before. And there was 9 months left of the war then. It marked the end of it. And that was when the Patton led the army, and the Battle of Ardennes, which was the last battle of the war, took place. So Hitler thought he escaped his assassination, which took place on the July 20th eclipse again, but he didn't, because just shortly after that it was all over. So there you go. Anyway, so the atomic bomb test. So I think I put the chart up for the test, didn't I, Linda? I think I did. Is the chart there? Yeah. So yeah, that's the test. And I should have actually put on the chart for the actual dropping of the bomb, but okay. So I got a bit mixed up because I was very tired. I was trying to rush it at that point. And the solar eclipse on the 9th of July, 1945, I think I put the details there. Yeah, but the actual ascendant of that should be 28 degrees, 2855 Libra. Which doesn't matter. I mean, it's got the right placements, everything. It is on the 9th of July, but yeah, hold on. Yeah, I got it confused because the actual atomic bomb, when it was dropped, was on Okay, the eclipse is July 9th. It's so much, sorry, it's so much detail. I'm not a physicist, so just a humble astrologer. Anyway, so the solar eclipse of 9th of July took place, and that's under GMT, and that the ascendant was 28 degrees 55. That's the eclipse on the 9th of July. So shortly following that, and that eclipse took place at 17 degrees Cancer. So I should have put that up, but I didn't. I put the actual test on, didn't I? I think I did that. Yeah, that's the test I put on for the chart. Yeah, that's the test. Okay, so the bond test took place a week later, on the July 16th, on that date. And that obviously is only a week after the eclipse. The eclipse was at 16 degrees, 17 degrees Cancer. And when the atomic bomb was tested, the Trinity test, the ascendant, remarkably, was 16 degrees Cancer. I should have put both charts up, then you could have seen, but never mind. You can do it yourself if you want. But Saturn was rising as well at 15, 16 Cancer. Quite amazing. So Saturn, in other words, conjunct the eclipse as it was actually rising when the test took place. So they're remarkable charts. And of course, shortly after that, on August the 6th, the Hiroshima bomb and the Nagasaki bombs were dropped. And the Hiroshima bomb, which I didn't put the chart up, but the date obviously is August 6, 1945, 8:15, Japan. And in that chart, remarkably, the moon is back to, it's there, it's conjunct Saturn at 18 degrees Cancer. So it's extraordinary. And Pluto has finally moved on, as it did at the end of the war. It's to 10 degrees Leo. It's as though it couldn't move to that last 10 degree, it kept going retrograde all throughout the war. I mean, in the last phase of the war. And then it finally moved on to 10 degrees and it was all over. And it's back at 10 degrees and the bomb drops. So, and the sun, of course, because it's August the 6th, is at 13 degrees Leo again. So there's a sort of fate in it all. Humanity is oppressed, I think, by the feeling that obviously that all this science, and we're amazed by the science, we're a bit scared of it because obviously I think it's gone so fast in the recent years, and it is getting faster. The developments, which could, there's a bit of fear now it could get out of hand, and we could get, and I think there's a possibility, unless we become conscious enough, that we could become, the big brother states, that the patriarchy could get even more of control over people, the collective, by using the new technology, computers and AI and all of that. But the great thing, as we know, is that our consciousness is accelerating, and we don't really think that's going to happen. And I don't think it is going to happen, because everything seems, as an evolutionary astrologers, it seems like as dark as things get, and it does get dark, very dark, as in the bomb, that illuminates our shadow. The darkness illuminates what we need to get hot. We've needed the shadow in some respects to evolve as far as we could. But do we need it now? Do we need to be conscious? Do we need to reach for the light, to stop letting the shadow dominate us, so that we no longer need the level of destruction, because we can't afford it anymore? And that's where we're at. And it's good to look back and see where we've come. That's the path we've come. And so, obviously the next stage is, where do we go from here? And in part 4. Hopefully I'll get to do part 4. Is, that's an exploration of where we went after the bomb and what's developed since, and where do we go, what seems to be happening now, what are the signs. And astrology is such a wonderful thing. Evolutionary astrology is such a wonderful thing for guiding us. I just wanted to read it if I've got time. I don't know if I've got time after all that, but strange thing too with CERN. Yes, I wanted to put up the last thing. Almost forgot that. The next slide. Too many facts and figures. The next slide of CERN, the figure. Yeah, that's it. So this is the Shiva statue outside CERN, which is obviously it's the European laboratory for the study of atomic particles. Actually, is what it actually is. And it's the large hadron collider. But and that was opened in 1954. Recently, they've made huge progress by detecting the Higgs boson particle, and then recently in 2015, gravitational waves, and it goes on all the time. Weirdly, they've got this new machine, this machine here called Awake, and it accelerates electrons, but it's called Awake because it's actually, it stands for it stands for Advanced Wake Field Experiment, but they've called it Awake, another Uranian sort of joke. Little do they know. and it accelerates particles. They get accelerated by surfing on top of the plasma wave. You can make it up, could you? But anyway, this in Yesterday's Sky, I just wanted to say this quickly. Stephen Forrest's really good book on astrology and reincarnation, evolutionary astrologer, obviously. Stephen Forrest, very famous. And he says about when the South Node was in Taurus, I just wanted to say that at the start of World War II, picking up Hitler's chart, but he says about Scorpio North Node, South Node in Taurus, the individual is ready for a psychological leap forward. In this lifetime, he or she intends to dance with the shadow, to integrate parts of it. This is a very delicate step for an evolving soul. And obviously translating that collectively, it's absolutely what seemed to take place. Emphatically, the aim is not to become bad, rather it is to make peace with one's own pre-existing inner scorpion. Like Adam and Eve, it is time for this person, or the collective, to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Much of this work revolves around accepting one's own needs for power, one's sexual hunger, jealousies, control issues, as in war, all the dirty games people play. He or she must learn to accept these qualities, invite them to the table, and make some accommodation with them. In this lifetime, he or she is going beyond goodness into wholeness, which is really the highest form of love, a love that excludes nothing and shames nothing. In the jargon of psychology, he or she is learning to withdraw projections, which means to recognize in oneself the qualities he or she is most inclined to judge in others, which pretty much sums up what happens and is still happening. So just to end, what Oppenheimer, who was the leader of Robert Oppenheimer was the leader of the Manhattan Project. Oh yeah, and that's to end on the Alice Through the Looking Glass. But he made this about Shiva, which is the statue in front of. So just to flip back to that quickly, because it shows in the statue of Shiva, the slide of Shiva, it shows, you can see, that's why the light is there, because it's showing the shadow. Actually, Shiva is the lord of the dance. Where have I got this? Shiva is on there, first of all, because Oppenheimer made the famous quote when the test went off. And he took it from the Bhagavad Gita, which is now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, the story, and he quoted that, but what he actually meant was that not that it's just about death, that it is actually the transition. Hold on, I'll find that in a minute. It is about transcending worlds. Okay. So many bits of paper. It's wonderful because the shadow shows with the light under it that Shiva is actually stepping out, like the looking glass. Shiva is actually stepping out of the mirror, out of the glass, from one world into another world, which is quite remarkable, which is the link up with Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. And if I can quickly find this. Oh yeah, here we go. So yeah, it's, I don't know if you can see that, but I'll say what it means. It's King of the Cosmic Dance, Nataraja. Nataraja, 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 Sundara Nataraja is the Lord of the Cosmic Dance, beautiful dancer. The flames around the circle are the flames of fire, symbolizing destruction. The arch of the flames are the manifest universe and the cycle of birth and rebirth. The crescent moon on the headdress is the time cycle through which creation unfolds. The Ganga flows through the, or Ganja, I don't know, throws through his hair, removing ignorance. Flame of fire is the flame in his hand, in his left hand, symbolizing destruction. A small drum, Damaru, symbolizes the rhythmic vibration of creation. Om. The Naga, snake, coils 3 times around his neck, representing the past, present, and future, also Shakti power. The arms and legs honor the duality, revealing and concealing, Abhya Mudra. Shiva, as Nataraja, performs his Natana, which includes the Lasya, creation dance, and the Tandava, destruction dance, creation and destruction. His cosmic dance destroys a weary universe to make way for creation and rebirth, which is quite lovely, I think, and hopeful. Okay, so I don't know, is there time for any questions or comments or anything? Or?
Yes, yes. Any questions from the audience? Or
oh, you could put Alice on next as the last slide that Alice would look at.
Sure. Okay, looks like there are no questions. So, Michaela, that brings us to the end of your meeting. Any final comments?
Well, I did have a final one. I can remember. I can find it. But that was the final comment. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So okay. So as we live in 2 worlds. So we're living in a physical world built on the old 3D consciousness, but we're going to the 5D world as I started with. But the thing is, the perception is a change in reality. And as we perceive and we understand our past, just as with our personal paths, to move forward, to let it go, to let the darkness go, we have to understand where we've been and understand what we gained. All the things we've gone through. Humanity's shown itself up, yet we've gained so much, and that's what we need to do. We need to now reconcile where we've been in order to go forward. So
wonderful. That was so brilliant. Thank you so much. Would you all please thank Michaela Villiers-Kendall?
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you. Lots of
Thank you,
information.
Michaela.
Thank you. Bye.